Hello, my name is Tobias and I'm from Wonder Agency. It's a company I founded more or less exactly 8 years ago, and we are a branding and innovation agency. So we work with clients very broadly on all aspects of brand value creation and growth. Branding is really, to understand what branding means, you have to start by understanding what a brand is. And if you agree that a brand is just a kind of perception about a product or a service or a company, then branding surely has to mean that it's how you shape those perceptions and experiences of companies. So it's a really holistic concept. It's a much broader concept than most people would think of it. Typically branding is thought of as something purely communicational, but it's not. It's something that is even broader than marketing. What is the connection between branding, design and innovation? So I would say that branding, again, being how you shape people's perceptions and experiences, it's kind of like you want to affect how they view something, and the way you do that is through design. Design is a great way to systematically create value and difference, and that's what it's ultimately about. And I think innovation is pretty much, for me, in the same camp. I mean, innovation is essentially new value that comes out of the design process. I don't think that branding in its theory doesn't differ at all for startups and for big established companies. But of course, big established companies are usually in a quite different stage in their sort of branding life cycle. In big companies, what you typically have is you have a long heritage. So in both good and bad ways. I mean, in good ways, if you've done your branding well, then you have already a really well-established position and people really understand who you are, what value you stand for, and how you're different. And in a bad way, we could say that if you don't have a really strong brand, then you have to work with what you have and you can't make a leap into something which is completely different. So you can only make leaps that people will accept. So a company like Coca-Cola, which would start selling clothes, wouldn't make sense, but not that Coca-Cola has much of a branding problem. But in small companies and startups, I think typically you don't have brand recognition, awareness, trial, so you have other types of issues. So for them, it's more about, what is going to make us different? How are we going to be interesting? Why are people going to care about us? What is authentic to our idea? So it's kind of those more fundamental questions. So it's more or less starting with a blank canvas. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think my first advice is start with branding. Because if you don't start with the idea of how you mean to establish yourself in the mind of consumers or customers, then you might have other types of branding problems in the future. So try to be really clear about who you are and what you offer, and especially thinking about technology-based startups. Don't think of the value propositions and the offerings that you do as equivalent to your brand, but think beyond that. Don't think of utility and functionality alone, because that's kind of like building a better mousetrap. You will always have to compete on new and better features. But building a brand is something where you go on a higher level. You think about the values, why should someone buy into the values and the purpose of what you do. So be really clear about those, and then you're off to a good start, and your products and your value propositions might and will probably change. But if you have a good foundation, then you're set for a lifetime.